Tonight on Reel to Reel, we'll meet an artist with conviction.
Reel to Reel regular Mike Gallagher reviews The Mission.
We'll travel to St. Louis to meet a priest with a disappearing advocation.
Father Joe Glass joins us for a moment in history.
Take off with some pilots that fly so others may live.
And we'll meet a sister who takes a stand for the people in Baltimore.
Hello, I'm Father Dave McGowan.
And I'm Jane Rudolph. Welcome to Reel to Reel.
Good evening. There's no question that winter has finally arrived. And with the weather we've been having, it's good to know that there are always people on standby to help out in emergencies. Our first story tonight is about a group of such people whose heroic acts are something they do in their spare time.
The Medical Support Flight Team are a group of private pilots who volunteer their time, expertise, and aircraft in flying a variety of humanitarian missions. Whether it is flying tissue and organs for transplant, blood for the Red Cross, or transporting passengers who can't travel by normal methods, saving lives is standard fare for this group.
They're not an air ambulance. They're not equipped to treat people in the air. But they fly on their own time with their own expenses taken care of by the pilot. And these pilots have the satisfaction of knowing that each time their plane leaves the runway, it's not just another flight, but a life-saving mission.
My aircraft is a Piper Cherokee Aero, which cruises at approximately 160 miles an hour, has a range of approximately 800 miles, and burns in the area of $20 an hour for fuel. It carries 4 passengers.
Steve Hiltebeidel is a private pilot who volunteers his time and his airplane as a member of the Mid-Atlantic Medical Support Flight Team, a group of 17 pilots who fly a variety of missions out of the Baltimore, Washington, D.C. area.
We have decided that rather than just go up and fly from time to time to stay current, to volunteer our services. And regularly 3 or 4 days a month, sometimes more, sometimes less, we fly blood for the Red Cross. We'll go down somewhere to Central Virginia or West Virginia, pick up blood, bring it back to National Airport, drop it off, and then return home. We also do other flying for tissues, flying eyes, flying hearts.
Mid-Atlantic Medical Support Flight Team flies 3 basic kinds of missions.
Russ Griffith is the secretary and treasurer of the flight team.
Blood for the Red Cross, usually about once a month. We get a call from the Red Cross and they coordinate with us where they're going to be doing pickups on which specific dates, and our pilots commit to do those missions. The second area in which we perform missions is organ donations. We'll pick up a technician, fly them to that location where they'll harvest the particular organ. Then we'll usually take that technician and the organ to the place where they're going to be transplanted and bring the technician back to Baltimore, and that terminates our mission. The third area in which we do work, and that which is perhaps the most humanitarian, is with actual patients. People who, for one reason or another, cannot travel through normal methods.
Steve Hiltebeidel was called on to fly such a mission late one night. The passenger was a 9-year-old boy.
And a lady that had received promises from people that had corporate aircraft, jets, and high-dollar airplanes, had gotten a phone call to rush a liver transplant patient to Pittsburgh, but the pilots were not available on the faster corporate aircraft. And we rushed our plane up to Baltimore, picked up the patient, and rushed him to Pittsburgh. And it was really quite fulfilling to know that we filled the gap and saved the young man's life.
Steve Hiltebeidel probably flies 8 or 10 missions a month. He's very active in the organization and does a lot of flying, and because he has his own plane, he's more available for organ transplants and things for which we don't have a lot of planning.
With flight expenses running $20 per hour or more, it cost Steve and the other team members well over $1,000 per year out of their own pockets to fly the missions. But according to Russ Griffith, the pilots consider it an opportunity to make a contribution to their communities while doing something they love.
It's one thing to take your friends and get in the airplane and fly to Ocean City for the weekend. That's a lot of fun. But it adds a whole new aspect to what you're doing with your life and what you're doing with your flying, to fly a patient or pick up an organ or fly blood every month for the Red Cross. You feel like you've given something back. And I don't think you measure that in terms of dollars and cents. I think you measure that in terms of your own commitment.
If there are any pilots watching who would like more information about starting a medical support flight team in your area, please contact us. We'll have an address later in the show.
And now our resident reel-to-reel movie critic Mike Gallagher is up next to talk about a movie.
A movie that he really likes. The movie is The Mission. Here's Mike with more.
Hello, I'm Mike Gallagher. As some of you may have already heard, Hollywood isn't big on morality, either the practice of it or the depiction of it. So when a movie like The Mission comes along, it's worth taking note of. The director of The Mission is a brilliant young Englishman, Roland Joffé, the man who made such a stunning feature debut about 2 years ago with The Killing Fields. Joffé is not only brave enough to tackle challenging material, he's also able to grapple with moral issues. And to make things still harder for himself, Joffé likes backgrounds of epic dimensions. In The Killing Field, the setting was a tragedy of Cambodia, the Khmer Rouge slaughter of more than 1 million of their fellow countrymen a decade ago. In The Mission, the background is the destruction 2 centuries ago of the Indian missions established by the Jesuits in the jungles of South America. They were destroyed by soldiers of His Most Catholic Majesty of Spain and of his equally devout brother monarch of Portugal. The Bourbon monarchies of Europe, on whom the sun of world power had long since set, were ill-disposed to begin with towards the Society of Jesus. And the flourishing communities that the Jesuits had founded in frontier territory stirred the hostility of their subjects in the colonies to fever pitch. The Indian settlements were more prosperous than the plantations run by the colonists, and the despised Indians, who had shown themselves tremendously gifted in art and music under the enlightened rule of the Jesuits, were beyond the reach of the slavers who operated with the connivance of both Portuguese and Spanish authorities. A story to be told here, the nobility of the Jesuits, their selfless devotion to their Indian Christians, the tragic force of the inevitable denouement, is so enthralling that it more than compensates for some incidental flaws in the telling. The Mission is a genuine rarity. It's extremely entertaining, and it's filled with inspiration. It deserves the wholehearted support of those who have bemoaned the lack of such fare at the box office. And needless to say, I hope, it most especially deserves the support of the Catholic audience. I'm Mike Gallagher for Arts Review.
Thanks, Mike.
Don't go away. We'll be right back.
The House of Charity can be found at work throughout South Jersey, wherever there is suffering and distress. Through its agencies, compassionate care goes to the elderly. The needy receive food and clothing. Special education programs administered to the mentally handicapped. Expectant mothers receive pre- and postnatal care, and medical services are rendered to the ill. Support the House of Charity in South Jersey. Touch someone's life with love.
Being true to one's values is important in any day and age, but when an individual's value system does not coincide with the system in power, the ramifications can be serious.
For an example, we only have to look at the life of Jesus. When it came to what was true, regardless of the consequences, he would not compromise.
Our next story tonight is about artist Tom Lewis. His unbending moral standards have caused many hardships in his life. His beliefs have gotten him not only into trouble, but into jail. The civil rights and anti-war activist sees his time spent in prison not only as an integral part of his moral system, but as stimulation for his works of art.
I was a member of the Catonsville Nine in the 60s and had a long experience then in prison, 3 years in Lewisburg Penitentiary. And did a lot of artwork there. I am in jail, in prison. It works out an average almost once a year, or even more than once a year, for the last 20 years. It's not that I plan it that way, it's that things seem to work out that way, that I have to be truthful to myself and truthful to my art. So my art expresses who I am, and who I am takes me to places, you know, like jails, like soup kitchens. People are exploited by the culture and dehumanized by injustices, and that's what's being depicted. Witnessing for social justice is important to me in the sense that it's my life in the sense that my artwork is my life. I received the very good roots in my Catholicism, and believe that, well, what we read in the Gospels should be lived, and I simply try to live what I read and what I believe. When people see my art, I would hope that they come away with hope. If we choose that we're all part of the crucifixion, I would say in a very hopeful way, and I say that from my roots of Catholic education, to put it quite simply, that with crucifixion, there is resurrection.
Up next is Father Joe Glass to take us back to the 19th century and meet an American woman who founded a religious order in England.
As a foundress of a religious order, Mother Cornelia Connelly lived an early life many would envy, and a later life many would admire. Born in 1809 into a well-to-do Philadelphia family, Cornelia Augusta Peacock, at the age of 22, married Pierce Conley, an Episcopal minister who became rector at Holy Trinity Church in Natchez, Mississippi. While living in Natchez, the first of their 5 children were born, and it was here that Catholicism would enter into and play an integral part in their lives. Their involvement with Catholicism grew from Pierce renouncing his Anglican orders in 1835, to their being granted a papal decree of permanent separation, to Pierce being ordained a priest, and Cornelia pronouncing her solemn vow of chastity in 1845. At Cardinal Nicholas Wiseman's invitation, Cornelia went to Derby, England, and founded the Society of the Holy Child Jesus on October 13, 1846. Being a teaching congregation, it grew and established schools in England at St. Wilfrid's School, Preston, in France at Neuilly-sur-Seine, and in the United States first at Towanda, Pennsylvania, and later at St. Leonard's School, Philadelphia. In 1863, Mother Conley wrote her Book of Studies, in which her ideas on education demonstrated a simplicity and common sense seldom found in education during her time. The rest of Mother Conley's life was accompanied not only by great achievements, such as the restoration of the Great Hall at Mayfair from a ruin into a magnificent church, but it was also beset by hardships, such as when Pierce apostatized and attempted to attain his conjugal rights, and her congregation's failure to gain acceptance by Rome of its rules, which only occurred after her and Pierce's death. I'm Father Joe Glass with this moment in history.
Some priests go fishing, some paint, some play golf, others go down the shore.
And some do TV. But our next story is about a priest who, well, when he's around, you never know what might happen.
The parish is Holy Family Church in St. Louis, Missouri. The pastor is Father Paul Zipfel. Parishioners and students at Holy Family both agree that he is a man who always has something up his sleeve.
Watch. Here I have one and another. Now, if you look closely, you'll see an illusion. And the illusion is that these 2 rings are now joined together. I say it's an illusion because, you see, it merely looks like they're linked together. They're really not. Just like a ghost passing through the wall. Watch. Well, I guess I was probably about 10 or 11 years old at the time when I became interested in magic. I found an advertisement in a catalog 100 tricks for a dime, so I sent away. Priests naturally are going to be speaking with people and dealing with people a great deal, so I think magic has helped me to achieve a sense of ability to stand in front of people and to speak with them. Well, you know, I think that people like to be in fantasy land a little bit. I think that the hard reality of life is sometimes so difficult. What you read in the news sometimes is so heavy that occasionally people like to escape from that altogether. And I really think that when they can sit down and just be fooled and not care about the heavy things that are really going on, I think that can just transport them into a fantasy land that they really enjoy. So I think that's one of the beauties of magic, and I think that's what's so magic about it. It can really transport them to another world. Yeah, the world of illusion.
Because life isn't always as easy as 1, 2, 3, Father Paul feels it's important for everyone to have some kind of avocation.
If somebody asks me how a trick is done, I usually say very well. I do that very well. I find that if you really do explain something to the people for real, then they really don't appreciate the magic because they see basically how simple it is. And then the mystery is gone. I think more than anything else, I enjoy magic because it allows me to help other people to laugh and just to relax a little bit. It helps them to see me as a human being and I think see people in the priesthood in a very human way. Yeah. Well, listen, I'll do another quickie here for you, okay? Hold on tight. Now pull. That's it. Well, I think there is need for everyone just to enter into a land of fantasy and enchantment once in a great deal. And so there are many illusions. If you just use your imagination, many things can happen.
Don't go away.
We'll be right back. A few weeks ago, we at Reel to Reel began an appeal for your financial support. Many of you responded generously, and we wholeheartedly thank you. Because of that, we're able to continue to bring you our show every week. However, we still need and appreciate your continued support. As you know, for the past 5 seasons, we've been able to bring you this weekly show, requesting only your cards and letters in return. If you're a new viewer, or if you've enjoyed the message of Reel to Reel over these past years, we'd like to thank you for watching and invite you to participate in this venture by actively supporting the show. Today, with costs rising all around us, we need your financial support. A donation of $5, $10, $20, or whatever you can send would help ensure the continued presence of this program. Send your contributions to Reel, 222 North 17th Street, room 907, Philadelphia, PA 19103, and thank you for your help.
The revitalization of many cities throughout the United States has been taking place since the 70s. It's changed the self-image of many neighborhoods, created new housing for urban pioneers, and has added much-needed tax revenue to city coffers.
Commonly referred to as regentrification, the rebuilding of America's cities has and continues to be a positive phenomenon for many. But for others, long-term residents of these changing neighborhoods, it means aggressive developers and speculators, higher property taxes, and ultimately, displacement.
A Baltimore, Maryland sister is doing her part to help people who have found themselves in the path of bulldozers of change. Sister Barbara English is active in many ways in the Upper Fells Point section of that city. In addition to running a community center, she is also an active organizer in that neighborhood.
When we moved here in '78, my taxes were $225 a year, and this year they were $1,400.
Well, our taxes has gone up. They've gone up. They were $100 more this year than they was last year. I'm actually fighting for my life as well as for my house, and I'm not the only one.
The citizens of Baltimore's Upper Fells Point neighborhood are engaged in a struggle. It's a fight to preserve their homes and their way of life. Rising real estate values have caused property taxes to increase to the point where many in this working-class neighborhood fear they will have to move. In the 1970s, Baltimore began to experience an urban renaissance. Many neighborhoods like Fells Point, just a few blocks south of Upper Fells Point, became designated historic districts. With that designation came low-cost loans and government financial incentives to people who restore old buildings. But as in other transitional neighborhoods in cities across the country, such renovations have also caused property values to skyrocket, and along with them, property taxes. The neighborhood of Upper Fells Point is predominantly Polish and middle class, with a fair number of people living there on fixed incomes. When residents heard that their area was being nominated for an historic district designation, they began to worry.
Up here, it still is basically a blue-collar neighborhood. Down in Lower Fells Point, where a lot of gentrification has already happened, taxes are extremely high, and this is what we're afraid is going to happen in this area.
Your taxes are never going to come down. They're always going to escalate. But the idea of making this historical, they're escalating 3 times as fast as they would go normally, which is going to displace all of us people.
The neighborhood also feared a wave of gentrification and speculation.
I'm all for making a buck, but why throw people out that wants to stay for somebody else to come in to make that buck? I can't understand that part. I know of 4 houses, one for sale on a Friday, and Monday they were sold. I mean, this is how they're going. You got real estate people coming through the neighborhood, knocking on people's doors, asking you to sell. Where the hell am I going to go? Sure, like they say, we'll sell it, you'll get a good price. If I go somewhere else, I'm going to have to pay another good price for another one.
The people from Washington never did come to look at our neighborhood. All they did was rubber stamp the things that were decided in Annapolis. So that it was really
residents of the area have banded together to form a community organization called Citizens Against Upper Fells Point Development. One of the group's organizers is Sister Barbara English, director of the Julie Community Center.
The focus of the center is enabling people to stay in this neighborhood and enabling them to stay in a way that calls forth not only their responsibilities so that they can act in favor of their own neighborhood, be their own advocates, as it were, but also in a way that enables them to be proud of their neighborhood, to stand tall.
The Julie Community Center was started by the Sisters of Notre Dame and is named for their foundress. Originally, the center helped fill the need for low-cost housing in the area by raising funds to buy and restore houses for people of modest means. Other groups have now taken over that function, while the center has expanded into new areas of community involvement.
Have you applied for a job?
I applied at different places.
One way the center aids the community is by acting as a referral service to people with employment, food, shelter, or medical needs.
And you not only will gain all the weight back, but you won't be healthy.
Another service is a health program that gives advice about nutrition, stress, substance abuse, and medical problems.
So with the holidays, these places do run specials a lot. You know,
a food co-op helps provide low-cost groceries. The center also provides programs for youth and classes in art.
Because these laws is strictly for the Preservation Historic Society. To my estimation, for the rich, the poor ain't nothing.
Human needs in the Upper Fells Point neighborhood relate not only to economics, but also to human dignity. Sister English sees a parallel between her work in Baltimore and her previous work in South America with the Sisters of Notre Dame.
We have a mission in South America, in Brazil, and I was volunteered for that mission. I went and I worked in Brazil for 19 years. And I was very aware in Brazil that the major problem of people is land. Multinational companies move in and take over a vast tract of land and then the local people who are farming that land are forced to move. That kind of displacement puts them into ghettos at the edge of the city and takes them off a domain where they had control, where they were able to gain their living with a certain amount of dignity. And I saw immediately that the same problem was here in Baltimore, that people were being forced out of neighborhoods where they had a certain control over their turf, as it were. But it's the same question. Can we learn to have progress and to truly work on development, but not to do it at the cost of people?
Sister English and other concerned citizens canvassed the neighborhood. She informed residents about what becoming an historic district would mean to them and tried to rally them against the nomination. The effort failed. But Sister English is still working to have the historic district nomination reversed.
It is now to the point almost of ridiculous, because everything is becoming historic. Things 50 years old are historic. I'm historic.
I'm an antique too. I'm past 50. But what the hell, just because I'm past 50 doesn't mean you gotta bury me.
Some people see the designation of their neighborhood as an historic district as an asset rather than a detriment. In Baltimore, many areas have been made aesthetically more attractive, and employment opportunities have increased because of the revitalized local economy. But the problem of displacement continues, an issue Sister Barbara English and the Julie Community Center are working to resolve.
Breathing new life into a neighborhood in the form of rehabilitating houses is desirable in many ways, but the problems are apparent.
It's the conviction of people like Sister Barbara and Tom Lewis from earlier in the show that living out the gospel for them means standing up for their beliefs and working for those in need.
And we need to hear from you here at Reel to Reel.
The address is Reel to Reel, 222 North 17th Street, room 907, Philadelphia, PA 19103.
Or call us during business hours at area code 215-668-9842. Next week, Monsignor Daniel Murray joins us from the pulpit.
We'll travel to Los Angeles to see how the homeless are acting on their future.
Father Tom Legere has some surprising advice on keeping busy.
And we'll meet a group of volunteers who've made a commitment to the poor.
We hope you enjoyed tonight's show, and we'll be looking for you next week. Good night.
Good night, and be a people of hope, for Jesus is Lord.
Travel arrangements for Reel to Reel by Atkinson and Mullen Travel of Media, PA. Phone area 215-565-7070.
You've learned a lot in your life. Share the experience of a lifetime.
Come join us on Thursday at Incarnation of Our Lord Church, 5th Street and Lindley Avenue. Charismatic prayer and praise begin at 7:30 p.m. with Mass at 8.
Even if you're totally new to charismatic renewal, come. We have talks to help you get acquainted.
See you on Thursday at Incarnation, 7:30 p.m.
Call now 215-668-HOPE for further information.